everybody. This is Stacy with Stacy's Organizing and Decorating for Life, or stacyforlife.com. Here to help you organize your thoughts and decorate your perspectives. And as you saw, I posted the video from last week, or today, pretty much, kind of, because I do the videos a day in advance. So I posted last week's video today. And what I say about that is, we're talking about grief this month. March Madness to me means grief, because I've experienced a lot of grief in March. So my journey with that hopefully will help somebody else. This is by no means, as I say, a manual for telling other people how to handle your grief, because everybody's grief is individual, as is their childhood, as is their own children. When you have, children, they're all different. So all of our grief is different. This is just offering different ways and different things that were exposed to me. And when people are ready to deal with grief on different levels, the things that they need, the tools that they need will be there for them to kind of get a different perspective or a different idea. But does grief ever go away? I don't know. I know that for me that, my son was named after my great-grandma, crying about the, loss of her son when she was 90 years old, So I don't know that it goes away. Grief is transformative. It's transformative continually in our different aspects and different perspectives of it and our thoughts of it. But I don't know that it goes away. So this is not any means by a video to tell you how it's going to go away. It's to offer ideas on your journey. So first off, on today's video, I think what I want to talk about is, where did we get our first experiences with grief to begin with? Most of the time it was when we were children growing up and somebody died in the family. And for me, that was, the first one was my granny, and I really didn't know about death. I was 6 years old when my granny, passed, and I remember my mom and my aunt taking me to see her, in the casket in those days, and my mom or my aunt, one of them told me, you can touch her hand. So I touched her hand, and it was really cold. I remember that freaked me out. So that was my first experience with grief. Probably the second experience was I had an aunt die, a beautiful aunt of mine die, and she left 2 boys behind. Why does that happen? The third experience was probably, these are all different, and the third experience was probably Elvis Presley. I grew up listening to Elvis Presley. I was 12 years old when Elvis Presley died, and everyone thought, oh, he couldn't live because of the loss of his mom. This was the big thing that went on, is, oh, he couldn't live for the loss of his mom and everything. And that seemed so sweet and sentimental at the time. But as I'm grown now, I'm thinking, that's fucked up. It just is, because I know that for me, my mom in my living is my biggest fan. Thanks, Mom. But also would hope that when she passes, but when that happens, is that she would still be on my side, that she wouldn't want me to be ruining and destroying my life because that happened. So in turn, when I lost my son, I didn't ruin and destroy my life, because that wouldn't honor him and would not bring him pride. Because I think that really what I want to say is that we have to feel our feelings. I'm not by any means saying don't feel your feelings. I'm just saying that we can't be reckless. We can't wish ourselves dead because we lose people in our lives. So what this video in particular this week is suggesting, where did your ideas come from? And when you look back at them now, do you think they're good ideas, or do you think they're messed up, like I do about Elvis? As I loved Elvis. It's not to slight Elvis or think anything, because Elvis was an addict, I'm an addict, and I love my mom, he loves his mom. Those things, you can, look at the commonalities. I'm not trying to diss anybody. I'm just trying to talk about our own ideas. And last week I touched on where we get codependency, and that's from those ideas that we develop in childhood. And much of that is even about grief, So we, our families will talk about people having babies. Our families will talk about people dying, and we all that stuff is fed into our head in those formative years. So that's how we develop that. It's not to say that grief is not painful. I've been fortunate to have enough experience to be able to talk about my grief many times. Sometimes I talk about my grief just like I'm talking to you right now. Sometimes I'm more vulnerable. I can be more vulnerable with those that I feel like being vulnerable with. I'm very fortunate that even though I live in Cancun now, or I'm in Mexico all the time, I'm able to talk to people still yet about my love, my son and everything else, or my dad, or whoever I want to talk to. And they can sit with me and not make things, it cannot seem uncomfortable. They wouldn't make things uncomfortable. It can be a not uncomfortable thing which oftentimes talking about our grief can be very uncomfortable. So it's about surrounding ourselves with people that we can talk about it. You saw the video last week. That was something that I created, a room that I created. My little bodega is my sanctuary. In Mexico, they've got a lot of little sanctuary things, monuments, honors to people who have passed on. And so I got to do a whole room like that, because one of the last things my son told me was, Mom, will you, decorate my place when I get one? That was the last conversation that I had with him. So I do still decorate things. I do things in honor of him. A lot of our grief is that we feel like we don't have a place to put our love, right? So if we continue to do things in their memory, in their honor, that makes our hearts feel good. So I can only suggest to you, if you're new to grief, that still keep talking to them. Still keep doing things in their honor. Watch your language with yourself and them just a little bit. At first, when we're raw, it's all cool and stuff, but watching our language is very important because we're hearing it more so than them. They're in a place of divinity. I remember asking my son a question shortly after he had gone, and it was something I was feeling guilty about, because guilt is one of the normal feelings we feel. We all feel helpless. We feel powerless. We feel guilty. We feel all those things when grief is fresh and raw. Could I have done something else, or what else could there have been done? And I was talking to him one morning when I was doing a walk under the moon and the stars, and I remember him saying to me, Mom, it ain't like that here. So it's not like that where they are, but they don't have guilt, sorrows, and shames and all of that kind of stuff. It's not like that at all. I could suggest to you, because I touched on pre-birth plans a little bit last week, and we may touch on that a little bit more so today. But Sarah Rubel, somebody sent me her stuff. If you have a chance to look her up, she too has a relationship with her son on the other side in the next dimension. And you might have noticed in the video that I posted also that I didn't say dead. I mean, his body did die, but his soul lives on. So with our pre-birth plans, those are soul agreements that we have. And that's what helped me a lot with my grief, is when I got deeper into that and that soul agreement. But as I said, there were many paths, many stones before I went through this part of this transition in my life. And I'm going to read you a poem by Khalil Gibran, and it's from the book The Prophet, but it was something that I had heard numerous times through the spiritual baptisms of the babies in our church. But it kind of had been ingrained in my mind just as, relearning things. That's what I'm just suggesting to you, and looking back at those thoughts that you had about grief, the way that you learned to grieve as a child, relearning how to do things and how to have a different perspective. And it's not meant to be cold, and some people, when I'm working with them on codependence, it's like, oh, they're thinking I'm trying to make them be cold, and that's not it. It's trying to let you have peace so that you can let others have peace. So this is by the prophet Khalil Gibran. He says, your children are not your children. They are sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls. For their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends with you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. So with that being said, that's how we get opened up into pre-birth agreements, is that we all come here to heal. We're coming here to heal something. We made a soul agreement in the beginning. And there's movies like What Dreams May Come, Cloud Atlas, that, talk about going to the other side, which I've mentioned in videos before. So I encourage you at the end of today, at the end of this video, to continue whatever part you're in your grief process, to continue talking to your person. unless you want to think that that's crazy. But who told you that's crazy? Who says they can't hear you? Who says that when they leave and go to the other side that they don't ask for favor for you? I do believe that they do, that they want you to strive and survive, that they probably do in the beginning feel very terrible. But at some point, just as we're born into this life and can't even remember our own birth, they're moving on. It doesn't mean that they don't visit us from time to time, but true love wants us to do that, and we'll talk more on videos about love in the future too, as I'm growing and feeling more comfortable talking about different things on these videos with you. But I want you to think about that. That was from the Prophet Khalil Gibran. If you have the book, in my book, it's on page 17. So if you're new to this process, God bless you. And peace, I wish you much peace. Because it is a process, and be kind to yourself in this process. Do good things for yourself. There's many symptoms of grief. There's forgetfulness. Allow yourself to be forgetful. Allow yourself to be walking in circles sometimes. Whatever your grief process is at this time, allow it. Allow your tears. Allow those things. But don't beat yourself up if you can keep from it. There are those things that I talked about before. I watched another video discussing the grief and the process and stuff like that. And, last week I also touched base on the 5 stages of grief. But then there was another study. Things have been changed because even in those 5 stages, that was really based on a book that was written about hospice patients, that sitting with people who were grieving their own existence. However, they extended it out into people that were grieving people who were dying. But in the other studies, they've come up with the truth about the 5 stages of grief is that it was initially the people dying, like I said. But Freud said dealing with grief, if not possible, if you don't deal with it, it could cause psychological problems. So it's a way that we deal with grief. So that's why I opened this up, so that you could talk about your grief to me, even if it's just sending me a message or whatever, because it's very important to talk about our grief, to talk about our loved ones if we can. It does give you more strength and more courage, and it does honor their names. In 2007, there was a survey it's a common grief, and it's disbelief, yearning, anger, depression, and acceptance. Acceptance seems to fall in every area of the grief, because what are you going to do? Not accept it? And by me saying that we still talk to them, that's just because we still love them. I'm not saying they hear us all the time. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, because we don't know. I'm just saying that our souls desire to have that conversation. If your soul desires to have that conversation, have that conversation. So there's many different ways and processes and that you can look at grief and deal with grief. So we're still going to continue talking about this week, or this month, should I say. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And I will talk to you again about this next week. Thank you.